Well, Banji Alexander is a primary school teacher who's written a book to try and help youngsters cope. It's been acknowledged by the Mayor of London, and now Banji's been asked to share it with school teachers across the country. Good morning to you, Banji. Thank you so much for joining us. So, from a teacher's point of view, for all of us, the pandemic started with confusion, and presumably your pupils look to you to provide some clarity. That must have been tough.
Indeed. Morning, Vic. It was tough, and as educators, we are seen as, a beacon within communities, especially children. We spend more time with most children than their parents do, waking hours. So we had that, very difficult job of, trying to allay their fears, with all the new changes that were coming into place in regards to the pandemic.
Yeah, so you've got a whole... if you're a teacher, you know everything. Teachers and parents, youngsters... But that's what kids think, isn't it? You have all of the answers. You're basically the internet. And that piles extra pressure on you. And presumably the welfare of your pupils is really important. By the way, what age is it that you teach?
So I'm a primary school teacher, and my class at the time was a year 3 class, so 7 and 8 year olds.
Oh, wowzer. And so trying to guide them through, what did you see happen? What happened to the youngsters in your class?
Well, okay, so academically, there were gaps in their learning. Emotionally, children became more stressed. They had more anxiety. There were lots of questions about what was going on, what would happen next. Their routines were changing. Family members that they would see often, they couldn't see anymore. Some of them were struggling with bereavements. So there was just, a lot of fear and anxiety really with these young children. And it was our job as professionals, as teachers, to not only, lead on their education, particularly when schools were closed down and we moved to online learning, or, for key worker children, they kept on coming in, but we also had to deal with the emotional well-being of these children also.
There was a lot for them to go through. Some of their friends were at school, some of them weren't. There was the wearing of masks, which is disconcerting for youngsters even now, the sanitising, and then, of course, there's bereavement too. So dealing with all of this, it must have been a firefight for you pretty much every day, and trying to cope with the pressures of online learning at the same time.
Of course, and as I've said several times, there wasn't a book at the time that I could actually pick up and, read to my children. Children learn really well with stories. That's authors write books, to inform, to entertain, to persuade. And, at the time there wasn't a book that I could pick up and read to my learners. So I wrote a book with, my learners of what was going on at the time. And, we were able to have valuable conversations to discuss their feelings, to discuss characters' feelings. And it was brilliant for their mental well-being.
Yeah, I can well imagine. So taking it and putting it into a book, where do you start?
Where do you start? Well, the starting point for me, obviously, I saw what was going on with my learners. I saw what their fears were. There was a child in my class who wasn't able to have celebrate his birthday in the way that he would typically celebrate it. This was during the time that we had moved to online learning, and that was a predicament that I think quite a number of us, even adults, found ourselves in. People had to postpone weddings or funerals. You had restrictions with funerals, the amount of people you could have. So, I told the story from a child's perspective, because ultimately this was a story for children. So the protagonist in the story, the 7-year-old boy who's hoping to have his birthday party, which happens to fall during lockdown. Unfortunately, the changes means that he can't celebrate in the same way that he would usually celebrate. And for me, one of the key messages in my story is helping children adapt to change, and manage their expectations, because I think that ultimately is key to their mental well-being.
I think it's key to everybody's well-being. That's part of the problem with the pandemic, isn't it? Fear of the unknown and fear of change, and having it all sort of land in your lap at the same time. Listen, I wish you the very best of luck for the book. It's fascinating, isn't it? And to write it from a youngster's point of view too. Hugely helpful. Thank you so much for joining us, Banji Alexander, who's going to be speaking at the Pixel Primary Conference at Coventry Arena, which is going to be happening in March.